Welcome to Identity Crisis, a small episode before we film the podcast. Today is Memorial Day, and we wanted to talk about the Civil War. Bet you didn't know that there are Hispanic Americans that fought in both the North and the South. Before we get into it, cue the music. I know what you're thinking. Civil War, Union, Yankees, Southern, Confederates, right? This is an America problem. This is an America problem. This is an America problem. However, there are other things happening in the world at the same time that the Civil War is happening. For example, we talked about Cinco de Mayo the other day, right? On this segment. And we talked about the French helping conservative Mexicans in Mexico around that time, and how Cinco de Mayo is used to celebrate the victory of the Battle of Puebla. Did you know, though, that had the French won, the South, the Confederate South, would have had allyship south of the Rio Grande to be able to fund some of their missions, right? Either with weapons, artillery, actual people on the ground, right? It's very difficult, historically speaking, to place these two things together at the same time. At least it was for me, right? Had the French won, the South could have probably won. Isn't that a weird little alternate universe thing to think about? However, that being said, there was stuff happening south of the Rio Grande, right? So it shouldn't be that hard of a concept to understand that there was also Mexican-American Hispanics fighting in the Civil War. That shocked me whenever I first heard it. At the beginning of the Civil War, there was about 1,000 Hispanic Americans that fought for the North, the Union, and then there was about 2,000 that fought for the South. Towards the end of the war, that number had skyrocketed to about 10,000 total. That is kind of wild, because whenever you hear about the Civil War as a whole, you think about slavery, you think about what they were fighting about, you think about Abraham Lincoln and his efforts, his words, right? All valuable perspectives. But you don't tend to think about the demographic of people that were fighting in the Civil War, right? And what they were fighting for. Most of the Hispanic soldiers were Mexican American, but they weren't just Mexican American. There was a lot of Puerto Ricans and there was Cubans. There was a lot of Hispanics that were part of U.S. territories. And in that time, a U.S. territory did not have a right to citizenship in the country. There were some U.S. territories that were in the Caribbean, Cubans that are coming from the Caribbean, and some Hispanics from South America also. And some of them were ranking officers in the military at the time. Let me give you a few. First and foremost, you have Admiral David Farragut, son of Spanish-born Jordi Farragut, was promoted to Vice Admiral December 21st, 1964. You have Brigadier General Diego Archuleta, a member of the Mexican Army who fought against the United States in the Mexican-American War. During the Civil War, he served in the New Mexico militia. He fought with the 1st New Mexico militia infantry in the Battle of Valverde and became the first Hispanic to reach the military rank of brigadier general. He was later appointed an Indian agent by President Abraham Lincoln. That's kind of a big deal. Shout out to my boy Diego Archuleta. You have Brevet Brigadier General Henry Clay Pleasants, was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, American father and Spanish mother. He devised a plan to break the Confederate stranglehold on the city of Petersburg. He organized the building of the tunnel filled with explosives under the Confederate lines outside the city. Carlos Alvarez de la Mesa, Colonel Jose Guadalupe Gallegos, or Colonel Miguel El Pino. If you think about it, the Civil War is happening. They're expanding out west. Well, I guess for you guys, it's this way, right? They're expanding out west. All of that land is still there. Mexico is still there. All of the future residents of New Mexico, Arizona, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, all of those things are still there. That culture is still there. So it shouldn't surprise you that there is some involvement in this giant battle that's happening in the United States, right, between the North and the South. Even though they're affecting each other and they're at war with each other, it is affecting everything around them. And that's important to note. So many more. Colonel Federico Fernandez Cavada, Lieutenant Colonel Jose Francisco Chavez, Lieutenant Colonel Julius Peter Goresh, Lieutenant Colonel Francisco Parea, Lieutenant Colonel Jose Maria Valdez, Major Manuel Antonio Chavez, Major Salvador Vallejo, Captain Roman Antonio Vaca, Captain Stephen Vincent Benet, Captain Adolfo Fernandez Cavada, Captain Luis F. Emilio, Captain Antonio Maria de la Guerra, Lieutenant Agosto Rodriguez, Third Assistant Engineer Capriano Andrade. So many Latin people, Hispanic people that were part of this war. I gotta tell you, before me doing this research and trying to figure out, put some historical perspective on our ancestry, I never thought that we were involved in the Civil War. I only looked at the Civil War through the lens of American culture, what the Civil War was about, states' rights, federal rights, Abraham Lincoln, the usual things, right? But as I'm beginning to notice, again, with the expansion out west, there are so many cultures that are intertwined in this land already. That to think that out here in the West, there wasn't some sort of Latin American presence or Latin presence, Hispanic presence in general, you start to think about exactly who was being impacted by this and the people that contributed. And even though there are a lot of Hispanics also that contributed to the Confederate side of the war, again, that is still part of the history. So, in true identity crisis fashion, right? We are here to bring you a little bit of cultural perspective. When people say dumb things to you, like, this isn't your country, you can now a lot more comfortably say, hey, but we've been here and we contributed to some of the biggest moments in American history. Don't forget that. On that note, happy Memorial Day. We hope that this was interesting information for you. It definitely was for us. And remember, your history matters. Our history is intertwined. Until next time, peace.